That morning, when the family's career and future were at stake, the missing car keys were no accident. I couldn't find the keys. What a pity. The false sympathy in her mother-in-law's voice sounded like a confession of a small victory. Having ordered a taxi and maintaining icy calm, the daughter-in-law left without a single reproach. The mother-in-law was triumphant. Exactly until the evening, when she realized that a seemingly innocent prank had turned into a catastrophe that she had organized for herself. Good day, dear listeners. You are on the Dear Mother-in-Law channel, and I am glad to present you my new author's story. Enjoy listening. Mila glanced for the last time around the rented one-room apartment where she and Timothy had lived for the first 6 months of their family life. The boxes were neatly lined up at the entrance. The apartment looked empty and somehow alien. Timothy was fussing around the sofa, trying to unscrew the legs. They had bought this sofa on credit right after their wedding, and now it seemed too bulky to move. Maybe we should leave it here, the husband suggested, wiping his sweat. Mom said she had enough furniture. Let's keep it, Mila agreed, although the sofa was the only thing in the apartment that they chose together, argued about the color and were happy about the purchase, like children. The landlord will be happy anyway. Timothy straightened up and hugged his wife by the shoulders. Don't worry, this is temporary. We'll save up money, buy our own apartment, and for now we'll live with Mom. That's what she asked. Mila nodded, trying to look inspired. The offer really seemed reasonable. Why pay $25,000 a month for rent when you can live for free? Zinaida Mikhailovna had been persuading them for several months, repeating the same thing. Why should you, strangers, pay money? I have plenty of space. Live in peace. The mother-in-law's house was in a quiet area on the outskirts of the city next to a small park. Zinaida Mikhailovna proudly called it a mansion, although it was an ordinary one-story house built in the 90s. Years. 4 rooms, a kitchen, 2 bathrooms and a small plot with a greenhouse for one person is really too much. When they arrived, Zinaida Mikhailovna was already standing at the gate. A woman of about 55 years old with neatly trimmed hair the color of milk chocolate and attentive brown eyes. She always dressed impeccably, even at home she preferred trousers with creases and blouses, rather than tracksuits. Finally, she clasped her hands. Come in quickly, I've cooked dinner. The house inside turned out to be more spacious than it seemed from the outside. In the living room there was a large corner sofa. Opposite, a modern TV, everything in beige and brown tones, smelled of fresh pastries and some herbs. It turned out that her mother-in-law grew basil and parsley on the windowsill. I give you the entire left side of the house, Zinaida Mikhailovna happily announced, leading them along the corridor. Here's the bedroom, next to it is a study for you, Milochka, I know that you work at home in the evenings. And this is the guest room, in case friends come over. Mila was surprised. She really did work at home sometimes, but she never complained to her mother-in-law about the lack of space for it. Zinaida Mikhailovna, how do you know about my work at home? Timosha told me, she smiled. I am interested in my son's life. By the way, you can just call me Zina. We live under the same roof now. But Mila could not bring herself to address her mother-in-law in such an unbrotherly manner. Zinaida Mikhailovna was one of those women who keep their distance even in close communication. The bedroom turned out to be light and spacious. A large bed, a wardrobe along the entire wall, a dressing table with a mirror and even a small TV. This was actually my bedroom, admitted the mother-in-law. But I moved to a smaller room. The young need more space. Timothy was touched. Mom, why were you worried? We could have fit in a small room. Nonsense, Zinaida Mikhailovna waved her hand. I understand, my dear, she turned to Mila. These are not the times. You have a career, a husband, your own life. I will not impose advice or burden you with household chores. Live as you are accustomed to. Mila felt the tension leave her shoulders. This was exactly what she was afraid of: constant advice, control, interference in their family life. "Thank you for thinking so," she sincerely thanked. "I don't want to disrupt your way of life either." "What way of life?" Zinaida Mikhailovna laughed. "I get up, have breakfast, go to the garden, watch TV series. It's deadly boring, quote. And now the house will be filled with life." During dinner, the mother-in-law talked about the neighbors, about how the area had changed in recent years, complained about the increase in utility rates. Mila listened half-heartedly, thinking about how to arrange the office. In their apartment, she worked at the kitchen table, constantly distracted by household chores. "What kind of job do you have, dear?" Zinaida Mikhailovna asked, pouring tea. "I'm a marketer at an advertising agency. Sometimes I bring projects home when deadlines are burning." "I wonder," the mother-in-law drawled. "Do they pay much?" Mila was slightly embarrassed by the direct question, but Timofey did not pay attention. He enthusiastically talked about how he and his friends went fishing last weekend. "Fine," Mila answered evasively. "Enough to live on." "Of course, enough," Zinaida Mikhailovna agreed. "You're saving on rent now. You can start saving for your own place." Timofey nodded. "That's right, Mom. Do you remember how Dad and I dreamed of a 2-room apartment? Now the prices are such that for the same money you can buy a 3-room apartment, only further away from the center." "Times are different," sighed the mother-in-law. "Back then, it seemed to us that a 2-room apartment was the ultimate dream. The first 2 weeks of living in my mother-in-law's house were like a fairy tale." Zinaida Mikhailovna got up early. By the time Mila came down for breakfast, there was already a kettle on the table, bread and cheese were sliced, eggs were boiled. In the evening, they were greeted by the aroma of home-cooked food: borscht, cutlets, pilaf. My mother-in-law cooked with pleasure, but she was never offended if one of the young people had dinner in the city. Quote, "Don't worry," she said. "I understand that you have your own life, your own plans." She didn't ask unnecessary questions, wasn't interested in where they'd been or who they'd met, didn't give advice on Mila's clothes or her hair, didn't criticize her daughter-in-law for not helping around the house. She did everything quickly and silently. Mila even began to feel guilty. "Maybe I should help around the house more?" she asked Timofey. "Your mother is trying, and I'm like a parasite." "Don't worry," her husband waved her off. "She suggested it herself. Mom likes to cook. She enjoys it, otherwise she'd sit alone and get bored." Timofey looked unusually relaxed. Milo knew that his relationship with his mother had always been difficult. Even when they first met, he'd warned her that Zinaida Mikhailovna could be difficult. She liked to control, gave unsolicited advice, and sometimes overdramatized situations. "She's good, she just worries about me too much," he explained then. After her father's death, she became overprotective, but now there were no signs of overprotection. Zinaida Mikhailovna was attentive, but unobtrusive, caring, but not smothering. Mila began to think that she had listened to her husband's warning in vain. Everything changed at the end of the 3rd week. Timofey's boss called. "Listen, I have an offer," he said, hanging up. "They want to transfer me to the business development department. The salary is a third more, but I will have to travel on business trips often. Once a month for sure, and maybe more often." "This is a great opportunity," Mila was delighted. "You have long wanted to get into this department." "I wanted, but now I doubt it. What about my mother? She is used to me being around, and anyway, what if something happens?" Timosha, Zinaida Mikhailovna intervened, who was listening to their conversation from the kitchen. "Don't do anything stupid, such opportunities cannot be missed. I'm not a little girl, I can handle it." But Mila noticed that her mother-in-law's voice trembled when she said these words. "You see," she said to her husband. "Mom herself says that you have to agree." Timofey accepted the offer, and a week later he was sent on his first business trip to Yekaterinburg for 5 days. Zinaida Mikhailovna saw her son off with a smile, but Mila saw how she often glanced at the phone, expecting calls. "He actually calls every day," said the mother-in-law on the first evening when they were alone. "He tells me how things are, what's new. He's a good boy." "A very good boy," Mila agreed. "You're lucky with your son." "I'm lucky with my daughter-in-law, too," Zinaida Mikhailovna added unexpectedly. "Honestly, I was afraid he'd marry some." "And you're a good girl." Mila felt warmth in her chest. Her mother-in-law's approval meant more to her than she thought. During those days, she and Mikhailovna became closer. In the evenings, they drank tea, discussed films, shared recipes. The mother-in-law talked about her youth, about how she met Timofeyev's father, how they built this house. Quote, "We thought then that it would be full of children," she admitted. "We planned to have 3, but only Timosha was born. And even then, with difficulty." Mila carefully asked, "Doesn't the house seem too big now?" "It seems," Zinaida Mikhailovna sighed, "especially in winter. Heating is expensive, and half the rooms are empty. But I don't want to sell. My whole life is here." When Timofey returned from his business trip, he looked inspired. "Can you imagine? The project went off with a bang," he said over dinner. "The management is pleased. They say that next month we'll go to Kazan, and then, perhaps, to Nizhny Novgorod." "Wonderful." She smiled sweetly. "How are things with wages?" "I got the promised promotion, plus travel allowance. If everything goes the same way, then by the end of the year we'll be able to start seriously saving up for an apartment." Mila noticed that Zinaida Mikhailovna froze with a spoon in her hand. Quote, "An apartment?" she asked again. "Well, yes, Mom, we moved in with you temporarily, remember?" Timofey laughed. "We need our own place." Of course," the mother-in-law hastily agreed. "I just didn't expect it to be so fast." "No, not fast," the son waved his hand. "A year, maybe a year and a half. Prices are such now that even with a good salary it's not so easy to save up for a down payment." Zinaida Mikhailovna nodded and did not return to this topic, but Mila noticed that her mood had changed. She became thoughtful, absent-minded, sometimes stood for a long time at the window, looking out into the garden. And 2 days later, when the conversation turned to the next business trip, Zinaida Mikhailovna's back suddenly began to hurt. Zinaida Mikhailovna woke up that morning looking as if she had not slept all night. Her face was sunken, dark circles appeared under her eyes, and her movements became cautious and slow. She went down to breakfast, holding on to the handrail and quietly groaned, sitting down on a chair. Quote, "What happened?" Timofey immediately became worried. "My back just hurt," Zinaida Mikhailovna smiled weakly. "I must have overworked myself in the greenhouse yesterday. You know how I get carried away." Mila remembered that the day before her mother-in-law had indeed been busy with the seedlings, but she had looked cheerful and energetic, even humming something under her breath. "Maybe I should go to the doctor?" she suggested. "No, it's not worth it," Zinaida Mikhailovna waved her hand. "It will pass on its own, age, what can you do?" Quote, but towards evening she only got worse. She moved around the house with difficulty, often sat down, putting her hand on her lower back, and sighed so heavily that Timofey became more and more nervous. "Mom, let's go to the doctor," he insisted. "Or we'll call an ambulance." "No need for an ambulance," the mother-in-law was scared. "It's not that serious. You just need to rest for a couple of days." In the morning, Timofey was getting ready for work and was hesitating whether to leave his mother alone. Quote, "Maybe you should take sick leave," he suggested. From behind your back, Zinaida Mikhailovna was surprised. "Oh, what are you saying, son? Go to work. I can handle it. Milochka will be with you," Timofey said, hugging his wife. "If anything happens, call me right away." Quote. Mila nodded, although she had an important project and planned to spend the whole day in the office. But leaving her mother-in-law alone in such a state seemed cruel. As soon as Timofey left, Zinaida Mikhailovna immediately straightened up and quickly headed to the kitchen to put the kettle on. How's your back? Mila asked cautiously. Huh? Her mother-in-law was confused for a second. Oh yes, my back. A little better. The ointments probably helped. But when Timofey returned in the evening, his mother's back had seized up again. She met her son, leaning against the wall and smiling pitifully. How are you, Mom? Little by little, Zinaida Mikhailovna sighed. Milochka is so caring, she looked after me all day. She brought me tea, medicine. Mila was surprised. No one looked after anyone. They just drank tea together and watched a TV series. The mother-in-law looked completely healthy and even managed to go to the store for groceries. The next day, at lunch, Timofey's boss called, "Get ready for a business trip to Kazan. You're flying out tomorrow." Quote, "I can't tomorrow," Timofey answered immediately. "My mother is ill." "Is she seriously ill?" "Her back hurts. She can hardly move." "I see." The boss was silent. "Okay, we'll reschedule it for next week. But this is the last time. Baranov's project is important." Upon learning that the business trip was cancelled, Zinaida Mikhailovna burst into tears. "You're ruining the work because of me," she sobbed. "You had to go." "Mom, calm down, the work can wait." "No, it can't wait," her mother-in-law objected hotly. "You know how competitive it is these days. Someone else will take your place." Quote. Timofey tried to calm her down, but Zinaida Mikhailovna would not let up. She blamed herself for letting her son down, worried about his career and demanded that he not miss any more work trips. "Promise me," she said, holding his hand. "If you have another business trip, go. I can handle it." A week later, my mother-in-law's back went away as suddenly as it had started. She was again bustling about the house, working in the garden, cooking dinners. But as soon as Timofey mentioned a business trip, something would immediately start hurting her. The next time it was her stomach. Zinaida Mikhailovna woke up pale, refused breakfast and complained of nausea. She must have eaten something wrong, she lamented. Or maybe she was nervous. "You know how worried I am when you go on a business trip." "Mom, maybe we should see a doctor?" Timofey suggested. "What will the doctor say?" The mother-in-law waved her hand. "He will prescribe pills, but there is no use. It's all because of her worries." The business trip had to be postponed again. The boss was unhappy. Quote, "Baranov, my patience is running out," he said. "Either you are ready for business trips, or go back to the old department." "Give me a little more time," asked Timofey. "Mother is sick, and there are no other relatives. I'll give you a month. Sort out your family problems or look for another job." At home, Timofey looked confused. He understood that such career opportunities were rare, but he could not abandon his sick mother. Quote, "Maybe we should hire a nurse?" suggested Mila. "What nurse?" Zinaida Mikhailovna was indignant. "A strange woman will rummage through the house, steal, and am I completely helpless?" "Mom, but what should I do?" Timofey threw up his hands. "We can't lose our job." "Go," his mother-in-law said firmly. "I can handle it." "But you are sick." "More, but not dying. Milochka will be with me if something happens." Mila felt the responsibility falling on her. She worked in an advertising agency, where deadlines were burning every day, and clients demanded constant attention, but it was awkward to refuse. Quote, "Of course," she agreed. "I'll keep an eye on you." "That's good," Timofey was delighted. "Mom, if anything happens, call me right away. I'll fly in the same day." "I'll definitely call," Zinaida Mikhailovna promised. But as soon as Timofey left for the airport, her mother-in-law's stomach miraculously stopped hurting. She cooked breakfast, sang cheerfully while harvesting cucumbers, and in the evening even suggested going to the movies. "How are you feeling?" asked Mila. "Excellent," Zinaida Mikhailovna answered cheerfully. Apparently, when she found out that Timosha had arrived safely, she immediately felt better. It was all nerves. But in the morning, when Timofey called to inquire about his mother's health, she again spoke in a weak voice. Slowly, son, Milochka is helping. Don't worry about me. Mila listened to this conversation and was perplexed. Half an hour ago, her mother-in-law was vigorously vacuuming the living room and planning a trip to the dacha market. These days, Zinaida Mikhailovna began to take a strange interest in their finances. At first, carefully, as if in passing. Milochka, do you have a good salary? She asked over breakfast. Normal, Mila answered. Why are you asking? Yes, I'm just curious. You are planning to buy an apartment, you've probably already started saving. We're just starting, admitted Mila. Timofey got a promotion. Now we will put aside a serious amount every month. How much do you plan to spend on an apartment? Mila felt awkward with such a direct question. It depends on what we find, maybe a 3-room apartment in a new area, or maybe a 2-room apartment closer to the center. I see, Naida Mikhailovna drawled. Have you collected a lot already? Not very much yet, Mila answered evasively. We've just started. And you also have a contribution. What contribution? Well, into the common fund. Your salary also goes towards the apartment. Of course, Mila was surprised. How could it be otherwise? Zinaida Mikhailovna nodded, but something strange flashed in her eyes, satisfaction or calculation. The next day the questions continued. Have you already chosen a bank for the mortgage? We haven't chosen yet, Mila answered. It's too early. First, we'll save up the down payment. How much percent do you need? Usually 30% of the cost of the apartment. A lot, the mother-in-law shook her head. So, if the apartment costs 3 million, then you need to save up 1 million. Something like that. And how long will it take you to save up 1 million? Mila began to get irritated by the persistent questions. Zinaida Mikhailovna, why do you need to know this? Just out of curiosity, the mother-in-law was embarrassed. I don't know how people buy apartments now. It was easier in my time. In your time, they generally gave out apartments for free, Mila laughed. Not exactly for free, Zinaida Mikhailovna objected. You had to stand in line. My husband and I waited for 7 years, and then decided to build a house. Timofey returned from a business trip satisfied. The project in Kazan was a success, the management was delighted, and an even more profitable contract was planned for the following month. Imagine, he said over dinner, if everything goes like this, then by the new year we will have enough money for a down payment. Great, Mila was delighted. And where are we going to look for an apartment? I think in the new micro-district behind the park. They are building good houses there now, and the prices are still reasonable. Zinaida Mikhailovna listened to their conversation in silence. Her face was thoughtful, and her eyes shone strangely. Mom, why are you silent? Timofey asked. I'm happy for you, she smiled. It's just a shame that you'll be leaving me. Yes, we won't be far away, assured her son. We'll come every weekend. Every weekend, repeated the mother-in-law. Of course, but Mila saw that there was no joy in her eyes. There was something else, anxiety, confusion, and maybe even fear. And 3 days later, when Timofey was offered another business trip, Zinaida Mikhailovna's heart began to hurt. She woke up complaining of a tingling in her chest and shortness of breath. Call an ambulance, she asked her son. Of course, Mom, Timofey panicked. The doctors who arrived took an electrocardiogram, measured my blood pressure, and listened to my heart. The results were encouraging. No serious problems were found. Perhaps it was neurosis, the doctor suggested, or osteochondrosis that was causing these symptoms, but it wouldn't hurt to see a cardiologist. You see, Timofey told his wife, I can't leave her now. My heart is a serious issue. The business trip was cancelled again. The boss was furious. Baranov, this is the end, he said. Tomorrow, apply for a transfer to your old department or quit. Give me a little more time, Timofey begged. No, I've wasted 2 months on you. Projects are falling through, clients are unhappy. Enough. In the evening, Timofey sat gloomy and depressed. That's it, he said, my career is over. I'm being transferred back to the sales department. Because of me, Zinaida Mikhailovna burst into tears, I ruined your life. Mom, don't talk nonsense. I'm telling you, she sobbed. You should have been patient, not complained. Now you'll be getting less, and you won't be able to buy an apartment anytime soon. Mila watched this scene and felt everything inside her grow cold. Something in her mother-in-law's behavior made her more and more wary. It was too convenient for illnesses to appear just before business trips and to pass too quickly when Timofey stayed at home. Milo, you'll have to take care of your mother, her husband decided. I can't risk my job anymore. Okay, Mila agreed, although she understood that this meant the end of her career plans. But when Timofey left on a business trip the next day, the boss gave him an ultimatum. Zinaida Mikhailovna miraculously recovered again. Moreover, she began to behave very strangely. At first, she began to ask questions about Mila's work. And they won't fire you if you ask for time off often. Fire you for what? Mila was surprised. Well, employers don't like it when employees are absent due to family circumstances. I don't have any problems at work, Mila assured her. Not now, Zinaida Mikhailovna agreed. And what if there are? They won't, Mila said firmly. But her mother-in-law only smiled mysteriously. The first accident happened on Monday morning. Mila woke up from the sound of the alarm clock, reached for the nightstand and discovered that the phone was wet. Next to it stood an overturned cup of water, which definitely had not been there the day before. Zinaida Mikhailovna, she called, running out of the bedroom with a dripping phone. What happened? Her mother-in-law appeared in a dressing gown, disheveled and sleepy. What's wrong, dear? My phone is flooded with water. Where did the cup come from? Oh, Zinaida Mikhailovna threw up her hands. I put some water on your nightstand last night in case you got thirsty at night. You must have caught it in your sleep. Mila frowned. She clearly remembered that there was no cup on the nightstand, but it was impossible to prove it. The phone doesn't seem to be working, she said, trying unsuccessfully to turn it on. Oh, what a nuisance. The mother-in-law sympathized. And you have important things to do today. The presentation is at 10 o'clock in the morning, all the clients' contacts are there. Don't worry, you'll buy a new one. Right now everything is stored in the cloud. Mila nodded, but her mood was spoiled. She had to go to the office earlier to have time to restore contacts from her work computer. The presentation went well, but without her phone she felt cut off from the world. In the evening, when she returned home with a new phone, Zinaida Mikhailovna sympathetically inquired, "How are you? Didn't it cost you much?" It did, Mila answered briefly. I was so worried, the mother-in-law continued, thinking that maybe this was some kind of sign, maybe fate was telling me that I needed to be more careful. More careful with what? With this job. So much stress, constant rush. Maybe I should find something calmer? Mila looked at her mother-in-law in surprise. Not long ago, she had been interested in her career, and now she was advising her to give it up. 2 days later, the second unpleasantness happened. Mila was looking for a folder with important documents for the tax office and could not find it anywhere. She searched the entire office, bedroom, bag, nothing. Quote, Zinaida Mikhailovna, have you seen my folder with documents? She asked. The blue one, with an elastic band. Quote, I haven't seen it, the mother-in-law shook her head. Where does it usually stay? In the office, on the shelf. Strange. Maybe she left it at work? No, I remember exactly that I took it home. Then look again, maybe she put it somewhere else. Mila looked until the evening. The folder was found in the pantry behind the jam jars. How did it end up there? A mystery. Quote, I found it, Zinaida Mikhailovna happily reported. Where was it? In the pantry, Mila answered, confused. You see, laughed the mother-in-law. I must have accidentally grabbed it when she was rearranging the jars. It happens, when I'm thinking about work. But I didn't rearrange the jars. I didn't rearrange them? Zinaida Mikhailovna was surprised. Strange, then how did the folder end up there? Mila didn't know what to answer. There was no logical explanation. On Friday morning, getting ready for an important meeting with a client, she discovered that the heel of her work shoes had broken. Just recently they had been whole, but now the heel was hanging on a thin strip of leather. Zinaida Mikhailovna, she called, holding the broken shoe in her hands. What happened? The heel broke. I don't understand how. The mother-in-law took the shoe and twirled it in her hands. Yes, it broke, she stated. I must have caught it somewhere or there was a manufacturing defect, but I bought them recently. The quality is not the same now, Zinaida Mikhailovna sighed. Everything is Chinese, disposable. Mila was in despair. The meeting was in an hour, and there were no other suitable shoes. She had to put on old shoes that did not really go with her business suit. Don't worry, her mother-in-law reassured her. The main thing is not the shoes, but the professionalism. Easy to say, muttered Mila. Appearance is important in my work. Then maybe it's time to think about a job where appearance is not so important, suggested Zinaida Mikhailovna. Mila turned around abruptly. What do you mean? Nothing special. There are simply calmer professions, without constant stress and demands on appearance. I like my job, Mila said firmly. Of course I do, agreed the mother-in-law. But how many nerves you spend, worrying about every little thing. The meeting did not go very well. The client was unhappy with the proposed concept, and Mila felt insecure in the ill-fitting shoes. The boss called her after the meeting. What's wrong with you? He asked. You've been kind of absent-minded lately. Sorry, some problems at home, Mila justified herself. Problems at home should not affect work. Pull yourself together, otherwise we'll have to review your workload. Mila returned home depressed. Zinaida Mikhailovna met her with a sympathetic look. How are you? Did everything go well? Quote. Not very well, admitted Mila. I told you there was no need to be nervous. Are you winding yourself up? Quote. Yes, probably, Mila agreed, although she understood that it was not a matter of nerves. The troubles continued. The following week, Mila discovered a hole in her new jacket, neat as a cigarette hole, although no one in the house smoked. Then the laptop charger disappeared and was found in the trash. Then the car keys disappeared. Maybe you're overtired? Zinaida Mikhailovna asked sympathetically after each incident. You lose and spoil so much. I don't lose or spoil anything, Mila objected. Of course, not on purpose, the mother-in-law hastily agreed. But when a person is nervous, he becomes inattentive. Mila began to suspect that something was wrong. Too many accidents happened in a row. She began to keep a closer eye on her things, but this did not help. The problems continued. Cosmetics disappeared from her bag right before important meetings. The comb broke at the most inopportune moment. The hairdryer stopped working when she needed to quickly tidy herself up. You're often late for work, Zinaida Mikhailovna noted at breakfast. Maybe you should get up earlier? I get up at 7 o'clock in the morning, Mila answered tiredly. Then maybe you shouldn't take so long to get ready? It doesn't take me long to get ready, I just always get lost or break something. It's strange, the mother-in-law shook her head. That doesn't happen to me. It never happened to me either, Mila said sharply. Until recently. Zinaida Mikhailovna looked at her carefully. Are you saying that this has something to do with moving in with us? I don't know, Mila admitted honestly. But it's a strange coincidence. Darling, maybe it's because of stress, a new place, new circumstances, the body can react like that. Maybe, Mila agreed, but doubts did not leave her. The situation reached its peak on Thursday morning. Mila woke up from the alarm clock, but the phone was not on the nightstand, but in the kitchen. Cosmetics disappeared from her bag, her comb broke in half, and the car keys were found in the refrigerator. What's going on? She asked her mother-in-law in confusion. I don't know, dear. Maybe you're a sleepwalker? What sleepwalker? I've never walked in my sleep. People don't always know about their own peculiarities, Zinaida Mikhailovna said softly. Maybe I should see a doctor? A doctor? Mila was indignant. I'm not sick. Of course, I'm not sick. I'm just overtired. It happens. Mila was 40 minutes late for work. The boss was furious. This is your last warning. If you're late again, we'll talk about quitting. I understand, Mila said. It won't happen again. I hope, the boss answered dryly. Mila thought about strange incidents all day. In the evening, she decided to talk to Timofey on the phone. I have a feeling that someone is deliberately ruining my things, she confessed to her husband. Who? Timofey was surprised. Mom? I don't know, maybe. Mila, what are you saying? Why would Mom ruin your things? I don't know why, but there are too many coincidences. You're just tired, Timofey reassured her. When I get back, everything will be fine, but Mila wasn't sure. She decided to conduct an experiment. In the evening, she deliberately left her phone on the nightstand, and in the morning she woke up to silence. The alarm clock didn't ring, because the phone was lying on the kitchen table, discharged. Zinaida Mikhailovna, she called her mother-in-law, how did my phone end up in the kitchen? I don't know, she was surprised. Maybe you drank tea in the evening and forgot? I didn't drink tea in the evening, and the phone was charged. Then I don't know, the mother-in-law threw up her hands. Maybe you really are sleepwalking? Mila realized that she needed proof. She bought a small camera and installed it in the bedroom so that it would be unnoticeable. If her mother-in-law really did enter their room, it would be recorded. Quote, Oh, you're going to be late again, Zinaida Mikhailovna said sympathetically in the morning, when Mila was panicking and looking for her car keys. You might get fired. There was something strange in her mother-in-law's voice, not real sympathy, but some kind of feigned one. Mila looked at her carefully and suddenly saw a gleam of satisfaction in Zinaida Mikhailovna's eyes. Everything fell into place. These were not accidents, this was a planned company. In the evening, when her mother-in-law went to bed, Mila checked the camera recording. What she saw exceeded all her expectations. The screen clearly showed how at 3 a.m. the bedroom door quietly opened. Zinaida Mikhailovna, wearing a robe and slippers, carefully entered the room. She took the phone from the nightstand, did something with it, then went out. A few minutes later, she returned and rummaged through Mila's bag, pulling out cosmetics. Then she went to the closet and takes out the car keys. All this happened quietly, professionally, as if her mother-in-law had done this before. Mila watched the recording several times. There was no doubt. Zinaida Mikhailovna was deliberately creating problems for her. But why? In the morning, Mila was waiting for her mother-in-law in the kitchen. Zinaida Mikhailovna came downstairs, cheerful and happy, as always. Quote, Good morning, dear. How did you sleep? Good, Mila answered calmly. Zinaida Mikhailovna, I need to talk to you. Of course, about what? Mila took out her phone and turned on the recording. About this. Zinaida Mikhailovna looked at the screen, and her face gradually turned pale. When the recording ended, she looked up at Mila. Quote, I can explain, she said quietly. Explain, Mila suggested coldly. I'm very interested. Would you like to explain? She added after a pause. Timofey doesn't know anything yet. Quote, Zinaida Mikhailovna lowered her head and began to cry. Zinaida Mikhailovna cried quietly, wiping her tears with the edge of her robe. Mila watched her silently, feeling neither pity nor anger, only fatigue from this absurd situation. I'll explain everything, the mother-in-law finally said, raising her tear-stained eyes. Just don't tell Timosha, please. I'm listening, Mila answered briefly. Zinaida Mikhailovna stood up, walked around the kitchen, and stopped at the window. You know how I lived before you arrived, she began without turning around. I got up at 7 in the morning, had breakfast alone, then cleaned the rooms where no one lived, cooked dinner for myself alone, watched TV in the evening and went to bed early. Every day, the same thing. Mila was silent, realizing that she was about to hear something important. Timosha called once a week, the mother-in-law continued. He asked on duty, "How are you, Mom?" I answered, "Okay, son," and that's it. I don't have any friends. Someone died, someone moved, I quarreled with someone over trifles. The neighbors say hello, but nothing more. I was completely alone. Quote. She turned to Mila. And then you moved in, and the house suddenly came to life. In the morning, the sounds of footsteps, conversations, laughter. Someone asked to make breakfast, someone thanked for dinner. Timosha talked about work, you shared your plans. I felt needed. I see, said Mila, that doesn't explain why you ruined my things. It does, Zinaida Mikhailovna smiled bitterly. When you started talking about buying an apartment, I realized that I would soon be alone again. And then I thought that if you had problems at work, your salary would decrease or you would be fired. Then you wouldn't be able to quickly save up for an apartment and would stay here longer. Mila shook her head. That's nonsense. Because of your pranks, I could have lost my job. I shouldn't have, objected the mother-in-law. I didn't do anything serious, just minor troubles. Quote. Minor? Mila was indignant. I was late every day. The boss threatened to fire me. I thought you could handle it, Zinaida Mikhailovna said guiltily. You're smart, you'll find a way out. What way out? When did you hide my things all over the house? I didn't hide them. I just moved them around so you'd stay home for a few minutes. Mila looked at her mother-in-law and couldn't believe her ears. The woman's logic was somehow childish, absurd. Zinaida Mikhailovna, do you understand what you were doing? Because of your moving things around for Vanya, I almost lost my job. Forgive me, her mother-in-law cried. I didn't mean to hurt anyone. I just couldn't bear the thought of being alone again. Sighed sweetly. The anger gradually subsided, giving way to understanding. She imagined this woman's life. A big empty house, silence, loneliness, no one around, no one needed her. Quote. But you understood that sooner or later we would leave? She asked more softly. I understood, Zinaida Mikhailovna nodded. But I wanted to delay this moment. I thought that maybe you would get used to living here, maybe you would decide to stay. Stay forever? Why not? The mother-in-law sobbed. The house is big, there is enough space. We could live as one family. Mila realized that before her was not an evil schemer, but a lonely woman who desperately clung to the illusion of family happiness. Pathetic, absurd, but sincere in her feelings. Quote. Zinaida Mikhailovna, she began cautiously, what if we find another solution? Which one? The mother-in-law was surprised. Well, for example, Mila was silent, thinking about her words. What if we don't rush to buy an apartment? We'll live here for some time, save up more money, and then, when we're ready to buy a place to live, we'll do a good renovation in this house to make it even more comfortable. Zinaida Mikhailovna stopped crying and looked at Mila with distrust. Quote. Are you serious? Seriously, Mila nodded. But with one condition. No more sabotage with my things. If something like this happens again, I'll tell Timofey right away, and we'll move out that same day. I promise, the mother-in-law said fervently. I swear, I'll never do it again. And one more condition, Mila added. We live our own lives, and you live yours. No control, no questions about our plans and finances. Quote. Agreed? Zinaida Mikhailovna quickly agreed. Then it's off, Mila smiled. Just keep in mind, it's not forever. Sooner or later we'll still buy our own apartment. Quote, I understand, the mother-in-law nodded. But at least not so soon. When Timofey called from a business trip in the evening, Mila said, listen, what if we don't rush into buying an apartment for now? We'll save up some money, and then we'll do some renovations in Mom's house. Quote, seriously? The husband was surprised. But what about our plans? The plans won't go away. We'll just put them off for 6 months to a year. But then we'll buy something really good. If you don't mind, then I'm all for it, Timofey rejoiced. To be honest, I was worried about how my mother would be left alone. Zinaida Mikhailovna, who heard this conversation, was quietly crying in the kitchen, but now these were tears of gratitude, not despair. The next months passed calmly. The mother-in-law kept her word. No more troubles with things happened. She continued to cook, clean, take care of the house, but did not interfere in the personal life of the young couple. Mila improved her relationship with her boss, and Timofey successfully went on business trips. In December, Zinaida Mikhailovna called them for a serious conversation. Children, she said solemnly, I've made a decision. I want to transfer the house to you. Quote, Mom, why? Timofey was surprised. Because you've become like family to me, she explained. And then I won't live forever. It's better to formalize everything during my lifetime than to deal with the inheritance later. Quote, but this is your house, Mila objected. It was mine, and now it will be yours, her mother-in-law said firmly. Only on the condition that I live here for the rest of my life. Mom, we're not going anywhere anyway, Timofey assured her. You are, and you're doing the right thing, Zinaida Mikhailovna shook her head. Young people need their own place to live, but now you'll have both a house and an apartment. A month later, the documents were drawn up. The house officially belonged to Timofey and Mila, and Zinaida Mikhailovna received the right to live there for life. In the summer, they had a son. Small, crooked, restless, an exact copy of his father as a child, as his grandmother claimed. Well, won't you be bored now? Laughed sweetly, handing Zinaida Mikhailovna her screaming grandson. I won't, agreed the mother-in-law, rocking the baby. He definitely won't sit still. She spent the whole day running around with the child, singing songs to him, telling him stories. The house was filled with new sounds, children's laughter, crying, babbling. Zinaida Mikhailovna was happy. One day, when she was sweetly feeding her son, the mother-in-law quietly said, Thank you. For what? For not telling Timosha about my stupidity. For giving me a chance. You're welcome, smiled Mila. Everyone makes mistakes. But not everyone can forgive, objected Zinaida Mikhailovna. Timofey learned about his mother's tricks only a year later, when he accidentally came across a recording on his wife's phone. He was shocked. Mom, how could you? He asked. I was a fool, Zinaida Mikhailovna admitted honestly, an old lonely fool. Why didn't you tell me? He turned to Mila. Because your mother is not evil, his wife explained. She was simply afraid to be alone. I understand her. Timofey was silent for a long time, then he hugged his mother. Mom, if you had just said that you didn't want to be alone, we would have thought of something. I know, Zinaida Mikhailovna sobbed, it seemed like I would be a burden. Nonsense, said her son. Family is not a burden. In the evening, when the three of them were sitting on the veranda, sipping tea and watching her grandson crawl on the grass, Zinaida Mikhailovna suddenly said, You know, everything turned out for the best. How so? Mila was surprised. If I hadn't put on these shows, you would have been living in the apartment for a long time. But we are all together. We have a house, and a grandson was born. Quote, maybe that was how it was intended. Mila and Timofey looked at each other and laughed. Mom, said Timofey, you are incorrigible. Incorrigible, agreed Zinaida Mikhailovna, kissing her grandson. but happy. And little Artyom, not paying attention to the adults' conversations, stubbornly tried to catch a butterfly that had landed on the edge of the veranda. He was just as persistent as his grandmother, though for much more peaceful purposes.